Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 1, Episode 23, Skin of Evil. It's been a while since I talked about a Season 1 Next Generation episode, and I figured I'd talk about the episode that is really only noteworthy because it's the one where Tasha Yar dies. That's kind of what people remember about it, along with this gooey sludge monster. But is it a good episode? Well, no. It's really not. But that's kind of par for the course when we're talking about Season 1 TNG. But I don't think I should waste any more time than necessary, so here we go. The episode opens up with the Enterprise on its way to a rendezvous with a shuttle carrying Deanna Troi, and she's returning from some sort of conference. And the warp drive on the Enterprise is down. They're realigning the dilithium crystals. And you can see that the warp nacelles are darkened, which I think is pretty cool. And Worf talks to Yar. There's apparently some kind of martial arts tournament on the ship, and Worf has a lot of faith in Yar winning the whole thing. He bet on her, and Yar seems to enjoy that Worf has a lot of respect for her fighting prowess. And they get a call from Troy's shuttle. The pilot is named Ben, apparently. We're on a first-name basis with this guy, but who the hell is he? We don't know. And the shuttle is having problems, and they are crash landing on a nearby planet called Vagra II. Some guy finishes realigning the crystals so they can now use the warp drive to mount a rescue. And I say some guy because for some bizarre reason, there is no chief engineer in Season 1 of Star Trek The Next Generation. I've heard reasons for why they chose to have a revolving door of chief engineers, but I've never heard a good reason. I guess we should just be glad that Geordi got the job in Season 2. And they arrive at Vagra II. There's no sign of life and only minimal vegetation. They locate the shuttle, and they detect very weak life signs. So Riker, Data, Crusher, and Yar beam down. They head towards the shuttle, but some oily sludge blocks their path, and it moves whenever they do. Tricorder analysis proves inconclusive. There's no evidence of organs or a circulatory system. The cellular structure is unknown. And then the sludge takes a humanoid shape. I mean, what is this thing? It looks like something you would leave in your toilet after too many doses of Pepto-Bismol. But it's not that. It's actually the villain of this episode. Tragic. And this goo calls himself Armus, and he won't let them pass. He doesn't value life, and he really just wants to torture them. Yar ignores the threats and moves towards the shuttle, and Armus hits Yar with some kind of telekinetic clothesline, and she goes flying. Crusher runs over to help her, but she says she's dead. They beam up with Yar and get her to sickbay so they can try to revive her, but they can't. And for some reason, she has this weird Nickelodeon gack on her face. Why does she have a Mikhail Gorbachev birthmark on her face? What the fuck is going on here? And I also have no idea why they didn't just beam directly to sickbay. I mean, maybe that would have saved her life, but in any case, a main character was just killed as though she was a red shirt. I'd say tragic, but it actually feels worse than that. But this means that Worf is getting a promotion, silver lining, I suppose, and apparently this Armus is capable of creating undefined force fields which naturally prevents them from beaming up Troi. I mean, is there anything this fucking gooey warlock can't do? In any case, the crew discuss their next steps in the observation lounge, and they decide to beam down once more. Picard tells Riker to prepare his away team, and Riker wants Worf to come with, but Worf says he'll remain on the ship because the goal is the safe return of Troi and Ben, and that can best be accomplished at the tactical position. I mean, it's very impressive of this lieutenant junior grade to be making such a big boy decision. I mean, Even if he's right, isn't that ultimately up to Riker or Picard? You would think that they would be the ones deciding what his duties are in these circumstances, but they just let him do whatever he wants. And I get why they did it. They're trying to show some character development for Worf, because ordinarily he would rush into battle to try to avenge the death of his friend. But right now he's more concerned about the safe return of the shuttle passengers. And I guess I kind of like that, although Worf will still display plenty of blind, irrational, berserker rage next season.
One Riker, one bridge.
But anyway, they beam down, and they also bring Geordi along this time because they think that his visor might reveal something that the sensors can't detect, which I think is pretty cool. It feels like they sometimes forget that Geordi's visor is actually an advantage in certain situations, although it doesn't end up being much use here because they confront Armus once more, and he kind of plays games with them. He's able to teleport Geordi's visor around, and he seems to take joy in watching him try to find it, like he's Velma without her glasses. Armus eventually gets bored of that and decides to talk to Troy. And apparently, the former inhabitants of this planet created him out of pure evil and then left. I mean, okay. And I can't say I blame them. He is a bit of an asshole. Then he decides to torment Troy by threatening Riker. Armus drags Riker into the goo. He puts Riker inside of himself. Yikes. That sounds more fun than it probably is in reality. And now Picard beams down to find out what the hell's going on. He asks Data if he thinks Riker is alive, and Data says death is no longer sufficient to alleviate its boredom, so he believes Riker is alive. And then Armus starts controlling Data. He forces him to point his phaser at various members of the away team until he finally forces Data to point the phaser at himself. And he asks Data how it feels to face his own death. But he says it's not really death since he's only a device. And then Data says that Armus is capable of great cruelty and sadism, no redeeming qualities. And he goes on to say that he thinks Armus should be destroyed, which is interesting. I mean, this is not the only time that Data has come to a moral conclusion that someone should die. He was also going to kill Kivas Fajo in the episode The Most Toys. I just find it kind of interesting. And I'm not even saying I disagree. It's pretty clear that this omnipotent turd monster should be destroyed. And Armus mocks his words by saying a moral judgment from a machine. And then Data walks towards Armus, almost like he's going to fuck him up in some way. But Picard stops him, which I think is kind of hilarious. I mean, do you know how hard you have to work to piss off Data? And it's worth noting that Data clearly does have some level of feeling for Tasha Yar, based on their past and based on how Data will remember her going forward. So given that, you could argue that he's actually showing some logical restraint in this situation. And eventually, Armus pukes up Riker, and he's seen better days. He looks as though things went slightly awry while he was trying to change the oil on the Enterprise or something. But he is alive, so Picard orders the rest of the away team to beam up with Riker while he stays behind. And Armus finally has a demand. He wants transportation off this planet in exchange for the lives of Troy and Ben. Picard says he'll consider it, but first he wants to see Troy. So Armus transports him inside the shuttle. She's okay, but Ben is not. As a matter of fact, he looks dead, but apparently he's alive. And it seems like Troy has not even attempted to treat his injuries in any way, although I suppose she may be hurt as well. And she tells Picard that Armus is filled with unfocused rage. When he confronts it, his guard goes down, and apparently so does the shield around the shuttle. He once again talks to Armus, Picard that is, and he tries to get him riled up. And he succeeds by saying he won't give in to his demands. Armus says he'll kill Picard and Troy. And Picard says you could, but that will only leave you here alone, forever, immortal, never having the chance to take his vengeance on those that left him behind. And this sends Armus into a rage. The shield around the shuttle drops, and they beam everyone back safely. And Armus is just left there screaming into the void. I mean, we've all been there, right? And then they destroy the shuttle in order to prevent any chance of him leaving. I mean, they really should try to destroy him too. I know the hand phasers didn't work, but let's drop some photon torpedoes on his ass. let's flush this turd once and for all. But they don't. I guess he'll just be alone on this planet, which is punishment enough. And now that the threat has been taken care of, everyone gathers in the holodeck for Lieutenant Yar's memorial. I say everyone, but it's really just the main cast. I mean, you'd think that other people on the ship would be here too. She has friends outside of the bridge crew, right? Where's the guy she was getting ready to beat the piss out of in the martial arts tournament? I guess he made it to the next round. And the setting looks like the desktop of a computer running on Windows XP. So that's nice. And they play a recorded hologram of Yar to be played in the event of her death, which might seem kind of ham-fisted, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Starfleet officers do this kind of thing. I mean, we all love Starfleet, but let's face it, the job is pretty risky. And she bids a heartfelt farewell to each of her friends. She addresses Data and says that he sees things with the wonder of a child, and that makes him more human than any of us. She also talks to Picard, and she thinks he was like a father to her. But she's never really had a father, so she doesn't know what that feels like. Which is a nice sentiment on the surface level, but I found it a little strange considering the fact that there was a point where she was basically hitting on Picard in an earlier episode.
Captain. Oh, if you weren't a captain.
Oh, if you weren't the captain, I'd jump your bones right now. In retrospect, it's not hard to understand why Denise Crosby wanted off this show. But she goes on to say that if there was someone in the universe she could choose to be like, it would be Picard. And she finishes up her speech, and Picard says, "Au revoir, Natasha." And I kind of like that he calls her Natasha. I don't know. I just think that's a better name than just Tasha. But that's just my opinion. And everyone files out, but Data remains. He says he's confused. He says his thoughts aren't for Tasha, they're for himself. He keeps thinking about how empty it will be without her presence. And he asks if he missed the point. And Picard says, no, you got it just right. It's a nice way to end an otherwise very mediocre episode. And it's pretty clear that Data has had feelings for Yar ever since they hilariously slept together in the Naked Now. But overall, not a good episode. Although I do kind of like the end of it. I like that Picard, with some advice from Troy, is able to basically defeat this thing just by talking to it. But I think it's just a nothing episode. And I think it's unfortunate that the writing was so bad in season 1 that Denise Crosby wanted off the show. You know, when Yar wasn't being pushed aside, she was often portrayed as just an object of desire for dudes, like in Code of Honor. Or she was telling Wesley how good drugs feel. Talking about her past experience avoiding rape gangs. Aside from that, she just didn't have a lot to do. And she could have left the show without them killing her off. Just like Jadzia Dax could have left Deep Space Nine without them killing her off. But they decided to make things more dramatic, or at least attempt to. Although I think it would have been more impactful if this was a few seasons in. You know, we're not even through season 1 yet, and she's being killed off, and we're acting like, you know, she's been around for years. And I always found it kind of interesting that Denise Crosby originally auditioned for the role of Troy, and Marina Sirtis auditioned for Yar. I can't help but wonder how different Star Trek would be if that actually happened. Would Denise Crosby still want off the show? Does that mean they would have killed Troy? Who knows? Ultimately, I think it's a good thing that Yar left because it led to the emergence of Worf as a main character. And whether you like Worf or not, he has appeared in more Star Trek than any other character by far. Michael Dorn has appeared in 7 seasons of Next Generation, 4 seasons of Deep Space Nine, and 5 movies if you count Star Trek VI. He's also in Season 3 of Picard, but we don't need to talk about that again. And of course, Denise Crosby returned to the series several times. So basically what I'm saying is that in the long run, it did work out. It's just unfortunate that she died a red shirt's death. I think that was a mistake. Her appearance in yesterday's Enterprise was a much better ending for the character, in my opinion. But that's about all I have to say for this one. Let me know what you think of this episode, and let me know what you think about Lieutenant Yar in general. And until next time, take it easy.